Hi, welcome to Rock and Metal Invasion. My name is Steve. Coming up on the show today, I thought I'd jump on a thread started by Josh. He started this thread on his the flip side vinyl community with JC, and it's basically he's calling it Lost Classics from the 1990s, and he's been showing a few albums that were released in the 90s that he considers great albums that are sort of been forgotten about, and other people have jumped on it as well. And I thought that's a pretty cool idea, actually, because I'm more of an 80s kind of guy. Well, certainly I think when I think about a lot of the records and albums that I show on my channel, it's sort of a lot of 84 to 92, I guess you'd say, that sort of peak hair metal period. So I do focus a lot on that, but actually, I've got albums from lots of different time periods. And, yes, the 90s, especially the mid 90s, it was a bit of a tough time for hard rock and metal. But there was still some good stuff coming out. And I don't mind grunge, I don't mind alternative, but it's probably not my preferred genre. But I was, still checking out music, picking up music during the 90s. Of course, early 90s, it was still really good for hard rock and metal. You could argue, I guess, from 92 onwards, grunge and alternative rock came in, and perhaps it wasn't quite so great. Picked up again, of course, in the late 90s. So what I wanted to talk about is an album that I thought actually someone may have mentioned by now, but from what I can see, it hasn't been mentioned. And I think it fits this thread quite well. Maybe it's not a classic, but it's definitely, I think, one that's forgotten about. And it is an album that has some really good songs on it. So first of all, I want to talk about this debut album by the band Bonham. So this is, of course, Jason Bonham on drums. This came out in 1989. It sounds a little Led Zeppelin. The cover art's fantastic, but you can almost imagine this being a Led Zeppelin cover art. So that came out in 89, and then in 1992 they released their second album, Mad Hatter. Also a good album. Change of Season in particular is a great song. Perhaps not quite as good for me as the first album, but still some good songs on here. But the album I want to talk about that's qualifying as my sort of lost classic from the 90s is an album by a group called Motherland. Now, this only is released on CD, so here it is. And it's Peace for Me is the name of the album. Now, this is basically Bonham. This is the Bonham group, but not Daniel McMaster, who was the vocalist on the first two Bonham albums. It's a different vocalist. It's Marty Fredriksson. Marty Fredriksson is kind of well known, but not so much as a performer, but as a songwriter. And he's written for lots of different groups. I guess probably most well known for having been a co-writer on a number of songs for Aerosmith. But he is the vocalist here, so he comes in. But otherwise, the other three members are the three members who were in the Bonham group. Okay, so this came out in 1994, and it actually does sound quite different to the first two Bonham albums. Definitely, there's some grunge elements here, sort of retro rock kind of sounds as well. Again, like I said, perhaps it's not a classic, perhaps it's not one of the great albums of the 90s, but it's a really solid album, and I think one that sort of definitely people didn't pick up on. And it really did have that potential to be a hit, because there are some songs that sound very much like it could be some songs from, like, for example, a Pearl Jam album, especially the song Brother, which is actually one of my favorite songs off this album. I could just imagine that having been a track off the first couple of Pearl Jam albums. So that's one track to check out. The title track, Peace for Me, is very good, and also another one I like, My Misery. So those are my three picks, the three songs I really like to play on this album. The rest, it's a bit hit and miss. Some of the songs I don't like so much, but it's a kind of album, though, too, quite happy to put on and play from start to finish. And yeah, definitely remember in the sort of mid-90s picking this up. It was cheap. It was like in the dollar bin or something like that. It had already been released, hadn't got a lot of attention, and yeah, it was easy. It was a cheap pickup. I gave it a try, and it's only actually later on I realized, it's actually the Bonham band, but just with a new vocalist. So if you haven't heard this, go check it out. Especially if you like the first couple of Bonham albums. Yes, it does sound different, but it's the same players except for a new vocalist. Yeah, Marty Frickinson is actually a very good singer. He's fronted other bands before as well, so good musician as well as a songwriter. So yeah, and then because this kind of bombed, didn't do so great. Jason Bonham then formed the Jason Bonham Band, which also had some members from this band, but yeah, different vocalists and a few other different players there. But of course, he's gone on to do other things as well since then. And of course, we know about Marty Frickinson. He's still working as a songwriter and producer and things like that. So there we go. Go check this one out. I'm going to put this down as a lost classic from the 90s, or certainly a forgotten album that deserves attention. So go check that out. All right, thanks for watching. We'll catch you later.